Can you guys get up front because you're a little bit shorter? Can you move in a little ways here? Thank you. Excellent. And how about you? Do you want to get in over here somewhere? Thank you. Perfect. Should I take away the pom-poms? Are they causing problems with people feeling mad they didn't get them? I'm sorry. I wish I had enough for all of you. All right. Here we go. Oops.
read is I'm going to lead a discussion and give you some information about places that you can get published and how to go about finding a fit for your work. And what I was planning on doing at this point is reading and then having the high school people read and having that discussion afterwards, unless there are people who need to leave early. Is there anybody here who needs to leave early? I guess we can have you do. Okay. Well, maybe I will read. Are you one of the people who's reading? Or you're just interested in the publication stuff? Okay. So maybe I will read, and then we will do the publication thing sort of as a discussion, and then how many of you guys are reading tonight? High school people are on the slate. And okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what do you guys usually do? 3 or 4 poems? One? Okay. We'll make sure I leave enough time. Let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is B.J. Buckley. I'm a writer originally from Wyoming. I am primarily a poet, although I write short stories, essays, book reviews, grocery lists, all those sort of letters, the normal sorts of things. For the past 2 years, I've also been the director of Hellgate Writers, which is a literary arts agency that serves Montana and the inland Northwest with a variety of workshops, readings. It acts as a writer's resource, and I hope that those of you who are really interested in writing will continue to use it. My tenure as director ends April 30th because I'm going to go finish my graduate school work and sort of take my life back. But the lady at the office, her name is Janet Zupan, and she's a lovely, gracious person and very interested in helping anyone who would like to use our facilities or our resources. Many of the things that I'm going to be showing you tonight we have in our Hellgate Library, which is a lending library, and you can come in and check it out and use it. The public library also has a great many of these resources, as do nearly all of the used bookstores in town, as well as the new bookstores. I've lived in the middle of nowhere for more or less the past 25 years. Where I lived in Wyoming was halfway between Sheridan and Gillette, Wyoming, on the old highway, 3 miles from the lighter bar, 10 miles from my nearest neighbor, 5 miles from Powder River, 67 miles from the nearest thing that could be called a town, and no one would laugh when you said that. I've lived in Montana up in the woods on a 10-acre piece of land for about the past 5 years. And I moved here because I answered my sweetie's letter in the St. Ignatius, Montana Sweetheart newsletter. This is true. I answered his letter. He wrote me a letter. I came up and decided that God had lost him in the mail for 30 years and moved. We live in an 8-by-17-foot cabin. That would fit in this room, I think when I paced it off when I was in here before, 5 or 6 times, almost 6 times. 8 by 17 feet isn't very large. We have no running water, no electricity. I'm in my second quarter century with no running water as of June of this year. We do have electricity up close to the road in his little machine shop in my office. But down in the house we have gas light and kerosene light and a little propane stove. And the only thing I miss is sitting in the bathtub reading trashy novels with lots of bubbles. And other than that, I don't miss not having running water. We have 2 large Newfoundlands. There's big black dogs that are sort of like St. Bernards, only they slobber less. And they're wonderful. Guinness weighs 177 pounds. Molly weighs 145 pounds. And it's nice to have something that weighs more than I do at the house. Most of my writing has tended to fall into 2 fairly broad categories. I think anybody who lives in the West for any length of time and who writes, the landscape gets into what you write, whether it's a poem or a story or an essay or your grocery list. And it gets in there not as a setting, but as a character and a presence and an entity that has as much power as any human character. So a lot of my work deals in one way or another with what it's like to live in that Western landscape and how it affects my perspective on the world. The rest of the other big category happened somewhat by accident. About 10 years ago, I had a residency at the UCross Foundation, And at the same time as I was there, it's a foundation which gives artists, writers, dancers, scholars a place to work. All you have to do is get yourself there. They feed you, they give you a space you can work. And there was an artist there at the time who was doing paper sculptures and who had people knocking on her door, generally old ranchers, saying, "What's that?" And she got tired of being interrupted and came over one day and said, "Here's the titles, you can tell them what it is." And so I started writing these funny little poems and jokingly said, well, these aren't really mine, these are Mad Alice's. And Mad Alice became a persona or a voice that I used first in sort of a lighthearted, comic way, in a humorous way. And as I got older, she began to mature, and her poetry tends, the poetry that comes out in that voice, tends to have what you might call a political, for lack of a better word, tinge to it. She takes on those issues that it's not polite to talk about in mixed company. And since about the middle of summer 2 years ago, Mad Alice has been on sort of a lunatic howl about the state of the world. Her hero is Robin Williams. She likes to do voices when she reads. And she got bored with herself sometime about the middle of winter last year and spawned another little persona that's just called the Woman, who's been writing poems back and forth with a friend of mine in Wyoming. And I haven't checked on her in a while. I don't quite know what she's up to lately. But it's been a very interesting thing to watch what happens when I allow my voice to go into some of those different things. So I thought I would read just sort of a sampling of some different kinds of things tonight, and if I get going too long, someone just throw things. This is my book, which is luckily out of print, so no one feels obligated to buy it. I lucked into this, and I had an experience which very few authors have, as I got to help put this book together with the small publishing company. I got to pick an illustrator. I got to have her do woodcuts. And most of these poems are 16 or 17 years old now. They were written in the late 70s to the mid 80s. And they're in a great measure about Wyoming and about the place where I lived. And this winter got really cold, and I took these out because I actually wrote a lot of these poems in Boston at a writing program. And after a whole year of writing poems I didn't like, in 6 weeks I wrote most of the poems in this book. I had finally gotten far enough away from Wyoming to see it. And things were happening in the world, and the world was very close in Boston. It's a media capital as well as being a writing capital. And this one is from a section called Stories, and it's a series of 4 poems called Companion Pieces. And it's the first time, I didn't title it a Mad Alice poem, but I looked back, and it's the first time that voice that started taking on the larger issues of the world in terms of where I was, which was a very rural place, started happening. First section is called Cold. Beyond a certain point, cold has no more meaning, no point of reference, no measure in terms of degrees of reality, in terms of flesh, in terms of what delineates between sleep and death. And the cattle were closer to death than sleep. 20 below, 30 below, 40, 50, 57, it had already been light for hours. We could see them all nose into a scrub cedar dusted with snow so dry it blew like dust, choked you the same way dust does. We forked hay to them over and over and wondered how their blood managed to keep flowing, to move at all. Out there, it's only the mind that wonders. Bodies just hold on as long as feeling lingers. When that was gone, there were only our fingers moving like stiff rubber and the odd sensation of arms that ended at the wrist. The hands, still working desperately, were adjacent but separate parts. And it went on, glittery, especially at night, when visions of a tiny whirling ball in the midst of uncaring nothingness became impossible to banish. The raw stars stripped of sparkle, our breath solid before it left our chests. It wouldn't be enough to push through and feed if this went on a few days more. Rabbits so sluggish you could scoop them up and they'd hardly notice. Birds falling dead out of trees whose branches snapped like buckshot from invisible guns. Trying to hate it. Failing. So beautiful. So beautiful. 2. Dead bodies along the highway. So here in almost April, why everywhere winter in what the eye comprehends? Why a refusal of the heart to take up warmth? Under and ahead of me, there's clear highway, its potholes blooming as prolifically as early daisies. The ground shifts and stretches, full of water in the low places. Most birds are back a month already. The herons along Clear Creek are auctioning choice twigs to all comers in raucous voices. But the depth of snow is only truly told in April, after it's gone, by what it's left hanging like laundry or old rags on the barbed wire fences. How could summer's dawn-spotted deer know what it was that bit at their hooves from underneath the yielding drifts? How learn the slickness of ice-glazed asphalt or the frailty of mortal vision behind inadequately defrosted windshields? Now they're suspended and perfect. No hair coming out in tufts yet, no bloating or blackening. They seem asleep at impossible angles, their eyes still open towards something that we too might see if we peered in the right direction. Their forms scream alive, alive at our knowledge that they are not. Whisper, take me down, I must go running. I'll welcome the rot when it comes, when it blows them up and deflates them, leaves a puddling of hide and bone that says death and looks it too. 3. In another hemisphere. The picture in the magazine showed them laid out in a row like logs, log brown skin and dark hair, American t-shirts, orderly. And except for the tiny holes in the wrong places, they could have been asleep on that veranda, their arms cast across each other's chests and bellies, a crowd of huge children in companionable slumber. But the bellies had begun to swell, and flies meandered across distorted faces. A man in the background had a clipboard and a list, a handkerchief held over his face against the stench. Did the photographer, too, hold a cloth against her face in order to get closer? I held that picture for a long time, staring, willing myself to feel anger or anguish or even a tiny sorrow. But it was too matter-of-fact. Nothing welled up in me to match the sick sinking of my stomach when 2 mornings ago a meadowlark dove into my windshield, it seemed deliberately. I can mourn shining feathers unburdened of flight, or rabbits crumpled and still, their spirits dashing madly about, not knowing themselves unbodied. I struggle to remind myself that the corpses in the photograph were hours or days ago, dead bodies along a highway, draped over fences, hanging from trees, fallen by the wayside with their necks at impossible angles. That they too at first might have seemed to be sleeping, their faces twisted only by dreams. 4. Thinking towards spring. I drive at night with the car windows rolled down. It's nearly warm enough. The air has fingers. I am trying to welcome it, to imagine green June and myself barefoot, learning some way to become pure of heart. I beg the dark to make it easier, to help the bone go back to earth, the flesh be made indistinguishable from the soil again. I tell myself that the end of life is a step in a metamorphosis as yet incomplete. But in the high beam of the headlights, every post is alive, every clump of untrimmed grass at the guardrails and bridges luminous and ready to jump. My foot keeps tapping the brakes for no reason. The world grows warmer with or without me, and there are more dead bodies tonight along more highways. I see them as if they were photographs, and this road a narrow gallery hung with faces and asphalt and lamplight and dark. Richard Hugo, whose poetry you may be familiar with and who has a wonderful book called Triggering Town, once said that the difference between poets and prose writers is that poets think about death all the time. It's true. After he said that, after I heard him say that, I went back and looked at my poems, and it's sort of true. This is a very short one. I'm, in some cases, a formal poet, and I like sonnets a lot. They're sort of the English language equivalent of haiku in Japanese. They're a form that is very strict, although not rigid, and which modern poets have played with and enjoyed playing with. And this one was one of the first poems that I wrote after I really got comfortable up in this part of the country. I grew up in Wyoming, where you can see the sky straight ahead in all directions, and the sun shines all the time, even when it's snowing, and where the trees are down by the creeks where they belong and they're not in anybody's way. And I had a real shift when I came up here, and the trees are everywhere, and the only way you can see the sky is by standing in the middle of the highway and hoping you don't get hit. And this one's called Grace. It's like coming out of the trees and into the rocky meadow, mindless and noisy, and your mind not where it should be, not here. So you trip on stones, and the supple willows whip the backs of your legs, and you swear awful words you almost mean. But the deer only look up startled at their fellows, blink 6 pairs of chocolate eyes to clear their vision, and they don't run away. They find, these lovely beasts, that after all it's only you, and they don't run away. They bend back to the grass as if you were not the enemy, as if with your distractedness and your clumsy body and your petty angers, you were as perfect and as whole as they are. Most of the ways that modern poets use rhyme is in an effort to have you not notice that it's there at all. Try and read you. I've been writing nursery rhymes. One of the things I talked about today is how much we reach back into the things that we know as children, and how startling it is to find out that what you think you've just learned you really knew when you were 4. Everything you need to know you learned in kindergarten, which is that horrible cliche book, but it's true. Mad Alice's latest effort, she's been writing nursery rhymes, the kind of little verses and riddles that you see as a child. And so I thought I would read you some of those, and then one more poem, and then we'll talk about some publishing opportunities. This one's called Pines. The first 2 are riddles. The third one's a jump rope rhyme. The fourth one is a irregularly rhymed takeoff on London Bridge. And the last is some verses that got left out of the book of Revelation. Pines. At the end of everything, nothing is so quiet as the loud wind in their arms, beasts furred with sorrow reborn as wood. When they burn, a door closes. Woodpecker thrums and thrums hollow waltz in a snag somewhere. The crooked verticality of desire is what they are. Tamarack, the bitter-berried juniper. Watchers. Out of the air, taloned stare. From the weed-veiled mire, amphibious fire. Along the roadside flame multiplied. From the dark wood, sharper than blood, in the leaf mold, emerald, cold, the dead in the grass, your looking glass. Jump rope rhyme. Sing for a slip, a turned ankle, crack of a skull on the edge of a step, the autumn red of blood and love put to the torch. Name all the countries, it's happening there. The wind, the same moon as always, the cold, clear air. The bridge at Mostar. I don't know how closely you follow the news. Mostar is a community in Serbian areas of what used to be Yugoslavia. And it is a twin village. One side was Christian, one side was Muslim. It was joined by a bridge. It was a bridge that was built by an architect whose name we do not know. We only know he was a genius because it was not built in the conventional way of bridges. It's largely unsupported for most of its length, or it was, supported by underneath arches and had large open spans. It's built entirely of unmortared stone, hand-cut stone. And the story of that bridge was that the architect built it, and then the people on each side were going to go across it, and he went and dug his own grave because the penalty for anything happening, and he was sure it was going to fall down, was his own death. And so this poem has some of those facts in there. About 2 years ago, this bridge, which has stood through something like 2,500 years of various kinds of wars, was intentionally bombed into rubble by the Serbs between this village. And those two villages had been managed to sort of maintain their peace for all that time. And as far as I know, they still are. They just can't get across to each other anymore. It's called the Bridge at Mostar. The bridge at Mostar's fallen down. And did you know that man who cut and set her final stone, all mortarless, went after out into that lovely late November snow alone to dig a grave, his own. So sure he was it would not stand. Beneath the veiled and jeweled palanquins, the passage of dark ladies fair, attended by their turbaned guardians, nor bear the horses iron-shod, who carried armored knights of Christian God. And so he stood, knee-deep in wakened worms and winter earth that smelled to him like summer and like birth, and counted life a worthy cost to see his dream made flesh in rock he knew as other men know women's flesh. While overhead the starry clock turned round and round as silent as an open tomb, and moonlight caught the razor spark of scimitar soft cradled by his most beloved friend and executioner. And when at dawn the arches held to answer muzzine's wail and chapel bell, the pale sun kissed the famished east, and no stone trembled underfoot of man or beast. The architect, whose fate was death averted, deep and deeper drew his breath, and breathed again, and climbed the auguries into a freezing rain, and went his way. No more is known of him. Perhaps, like Lazarus, he wakes and walks. Perhaps he stood to see the fall of bombs and shells, the coin of our familiar penury in this bedarked and bloody century. Perhaps he waited till the final stone, like London Bridge before it, tumbled down. Verses from Revelations, additional. This morning, blackbirds in the fallen fields were gorging and singing. Starlings called from the stubble of oats baled for hay. Stacked ingots glowing in the sun, and smoke and pollen a haze in the hot air. This is the world of rifle crack and violated bodies. Tonight, The women and the deer will melt out from the shadows of the pines in different countries in the clear half-moonlight, into the highways hurtling slaughter, pass like ghosts through the hooked wire of fences, going down as they have always gone for water. Let's see. Oh, let's try and end cheerfully. Let me see if I can find something cheerful. And short. Short is good. Okay, this one's called a scrap quilt. I took a quilting class a couple summers ago using all new material from a company that had bought the old patterns. Patterns with which some of you may be familiar on your ancient uncles and grandfathers. Those plaid shirts in shades of orange and green that don't quite match. Golf pants, plaids, polka dots and stripes in the same fabric. And I loved them. And I was talking to another friend of mine and said, I wrote a poem, but I think it's really yours. I think I copied something you wrote. It's my friend Cheryl Nothi. And she had indeed written a poem about getting clothes at the Goodwill thrift store in Missoula. And this one, because the fabric was so reminiscent of people from my childhood, became a poem about them, and it's called a scrap quilt. The sweet, soft shirts of sad old men sigh in the darkness over my shoulders, bunch up against my belly, hang too loose on my bones, the way my own flesh will. Aren't you afraid? And I say no. I could still smell the wet green cigars their wives wouldn't let them smoke in their own living rooms, the more dignified fragrance of oak burl or meerschaum. Then the cheap cigarettes and cheaper whiskey in brown paper bags passed one hand to another. The stories and 10 times twice told tales passed one toothless mouth to another on park benches and back stoops, in alleys. There my lullaby gone wordless as silk, and the papery skin of their palsied hands is where I write my dreams. Aren't you afraid? And I say no. I find their gray hairs in my hairbrush every morning. The oil in it smells of barber shops and red leather chairs, and the Saturday Tribune snapped smartly open. They all wore fedoras when they went downtown. They all carried handkerchiefs for weeping ladies. They're bones now, or dust now, adrift in the moonlight over my bed. Aren't you afraid? And I say, no, they're the bones and the dust of my long-lost lovers. I used to say, wait for me to grow up, and I'll marry you forever. And they did, and I did, and they're all right here. I have to go shuffle for a moment and get, thanks. What I brought with me, and which I would be happy to leave in Suzette's charge for, I don't know, till next week. You have one more reading next week. And these came variously from the Hellgate Library and from Ron's Roost Used Bookstore, so we do need to get them back, or I'm going to have to buy them. There are some basics about manuscript preparation which generally apply no matter what genre that you're writing in and no matter where you're sending something. Use white paper. It needs to be at least a 20-pound bond. That's right now. We are hoping in service of all those trees who die to serve us, that there will be people who will accept electronic submissions, faxes. Many of the bigger places are now asking for both disk and hard copy. So if you're a hardcore, I still have my manual typewriter person like me, the transition can be difficult because there are places that are starting not to accept something unless you send a disk with it. That bothers me a little that they won't take it because it creates, if you can't afford a computer, you're out of luck. But as I understand it, there's computers you can use in the library. There are computers in your school. There are always people with computers. We have one at Hellgate, and certainly there's times when none of us are using it, when it would be open. So basically, a clean copy, white 20-pound paper, minimum margin, 1 inch on all sides, generally 2 inches on top and bottom is better. Poems can be single-spaced. Type no smaller than 12 point, 10 point is better. It's easier to read. Anything you send that's prose, which is short stories, novel manuscripts, magazine articles, book reviews, double-spaced, always and without exception. If you use a paragraph system, make sure it's consistent all the way through. You can either use block paragraphs or indent, but you have to do the same thing all the way through. Generally, the accepted convention is to number pages either in the upper right-hand corner or in the bottom in the center. You don't number your first page, you number all subsequent pages. In poetry, if you're typing and your poem continues beyond the bottom of a page, it's a convention to leave space at the bottom so that you can indicate whether there is a stanza break or not. And that's generally done in brackets at the bottom of the page. You could say stanza break if you're at the end of a verse so that someone reading that will know, or you could say no stanza break so they can know that it's, if they print it in a book, it's supposed to be a continuous piece of paper. Anything that is messy, misspelled, ungrammatical in any way isn't going to get more than a 10-second look. Anything that's on colored paper, anything that has too tiny margins or prints, they're going to pull it out of the envelope, they're going to look at it, they're going to shove it right back in and put it on the throwaway pile. The number of submissions, even to very, very tiny places, is staggering. The New Yorker gets 175,000 unsolicited poetry submissions a year. Poetry Northwest, which is a tiny little magazine, gets over 100,000 poetry submissions a year. The sad truth is that when your envelope comes in to a magazine, a small publisher, what they're going to do is they're going to flip it open and they're going to pull it about halfway out of that envelope. And they're going to start looking. Some places ask for a cover letter, most places don't, and you shouldn't send one unless it's specifically requested. They're going to start reading. If you don't grab them in the first 3 sentences of your story or the first 5 lines in your poetry, if something doesn't grab the attention of that reader, they're going to fish for your stamped self-addressed envelope, and it's going to go right back to you. And right back to you is sort of a euphemism. The time lap has gotten sort of horrible. You need to check when you're sending somewhere whether they'll accept simultaneous submissions or not. Many of the larger places won't. More and more of the smaller ones will because of that time lag. You can send in a poem and they'll tell you 60 days and it'll be more like 4 months or 5 months before you hear anything, and if you don't hear from them, you might have to send them a postcard. Claire Davis, who was the director of Hellgate Writers 3 years ago, right before she left, had a poem or a story accepted for Southern Review, was published this fall. Okay? It's a 2.5-year time lag. It's not unusual between acceptance and publication. Shorter if you're a poet, but if you're a short story writer or an essayist, the time lag is really long. So you have to get in the habit of having groups of things ready to send out, and you send them out. When something comes back, you flip it in your next envelope and you send it out. You need to work really hard to keep writing. That doesn't mean everything you write will be publishable, and some people will tell you that when you get it back in not very courteous terms. But if you get in the habit of writing something, finishing it, typing it up, sending it out, it's a habit that will sort of support you later when your stuff gets better and gets to the point where some of the better places will take it. There are lots of sources for finding out where you send your stuff. This one, which unfortunately has gotten somewhat expensive, is sort of the Bible of small independent presses. It's published by Dust Books. And they also publish separate ones now that say for fiction or for poetry, but the truth is everything's in here. And what they try and do is get you to buy the individual ones, and it adds up to more money. So you're better off to buy this one. I don't know if the library has this. Fact and Fiction carries this. Freddie's Feed and Read, I think, has a year old. This is a 1990 one, except for the really tiny, eccentric little ones who are, like where they'll say, wanted incestuous horror necrophiliac poems only by women ages of 24 and 30 and by men 65 and over. And believe me, those are in here. Those don't last very long. There's not a large group of submitters, nor is there a large audience. But the big ones, the ones that are university presses, college publications, small independent publishers, they'll be in here. So you can get away with buying this book maybe once every 4 or 5 years. And I'm at the point now with this one where I'm starting to get forwarding order expired stuff, so I bought a new one on there. But this is still mostly useful. What it has in it, it's the International Directory of Little Magazines and Small Presses. And it's organized in several ways. There's a section which is organized by publisher. It gives you the name of the publisher or press. It tells you the kinds of things they publish, how much they publish in a given year, whether they accept unsolicited manuscripts or not, whether they pay or not, how much they'll read at one time, whether you need to send a cover letter, a biography, etc. Second section is organized by the name of the publication. Let's see if we can find those. Kooks Magazine, Out of Control Data Institute, Donna Cossey, P.O. Box 953, Alston, Mass. Articles, photos, art, cartoons, interviews, satire, reviews, letters, collages, news items, nonfiction. In italics with exclamation marks, please, no poetry submissions, no fiction. Okay? So she's after more of a visually oriented stuff, ads, collages. It will tell you the name of it, who's the editor, which that does tend to go out of date, but if you just address things to fiction editor, poetry editor, nonfiction editor, art editor, those names probably change, but the magazine won't. Gives you the address. It tells you the kinds of things they take, whether they pay or not. And some of them are very specific about what they're looking for. Let's see if we can find. Pebble. Greg Kuzma, Department of English, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, with the address. Poetry, circulation 400, one issue every 18 months. Published one issue in 1989. Subscription price per copy, samples available free, back issues 1 to 10 complete, they give you the price, reporting time variable, payment for copies, copyrighted, no line restrictions, no length restrictions. Some of poetry submissions will say 40 lines and under, no rhymed poetry. Some of the fictions will say nothing over 6,000 words. So this is a very useful kind of thing, and I keep it in my bathroom, because it's the kind of, it's sort of impossible to just hit cold. I quite frequently look for, there's also a category and a location in the back. There's a subject index, Hawaii, health, subjects, states, locations. So for instance, if your stuff has a Western tinge to it, you might look up the names of every Western state. You might look up cowboys, you might look up horses, you might look up ranches and see, you might look up rural and see which publications and presses are listed under those category things. So this is for small independent presses. Writer's Market is something that you're probably familiar with in one form or another. 1993 Writer's Market. This has everything in here. Children's writing, technical writing, magazine writing, fiction, poetry, lots of stuff. Complete sort of overview. And it's set up the same way. It lists the name of the publication, where it's published, the address, the editor's name, the phone number. 100% freelance written. That means you've got as good a chance as anybody. It tells you it's semi-annual. It has a circulation of 1,000. It pays on publication. Some of them pay on acceptance. If something pays on publication and there's a 2-year time lag, you've got to have a lot of stuff out there if you're hoping to support yourself on it. Okay? So little, very, very concise data, and it's set up this way. These are also broken down, and they're worth getting, the one that applies to your genre. If you only write poetry, or you only write fiction, or you only write nonfiction. Poetry Market has all the ones that are in here and about 800 more, and they're indexed the same way. Novel and short story writers market, they've finally done the good thing and started putting them out in paper. So instead of being $35, this one was $19.95. And I think the new one, they're expensive. They're expensive because of the cost of the paper. The other thing I advise you is if you're really going to spend a lot of time in these, get a reader's magnifying glass and use it. You can go blind. The print is teeny in these things. The good news is these, again, you can use these without getting too much back for 4 or 5 years. So you think of it as a $4 or $5 a year investment. It's well worth it. There are some regional ones coming out. This is put out by, this one was supported by the Oregon Arts Commission, the Idaho Commission on the Arts, the Oregon State Library, Blue Heron Publishing, Writers Northwest. It has little essays by writers, writing tips, things about teachers and young writing, publishing tips, 10 things a book should have, desktop publishing, introduction to book design, where to get your book reviewed, publishing in British Columbia, running the Redneck Review, which is a new little magazine, organizations, and it also has the same kind of thing, the listings of publications, what their address, what they want, how often they publish. Another publication which we have down in the Hellgate Library, and I didn't grab one of, is a periodical called Poets and Writers. Do you guys get that? It's put out by Poets and Writers of New York. It comes out bi-monthly, 6 times a year. And it has generally interviews with a writer, articles on some issue that's pertinent in the writing community. Sometimes it's contests, sometimes it's political censorship, sometimes it's why am I writing at all when there are 45,000 other people who live in New York who are doing this and I haven't even gotten out of state yet. It also has several sets of indexes, which are very current wants. They list and they have a classified section, and it'll have a magazine. When they say they want it, they mean currently, right now, usually within the next 30 or 40 days. They'll tell you, we're looking for articles by people who grew up on ranches, or articles about horses, or children who grew up with single parents in the West, poetry, fiction, certain kinds of things. And it's very current, and it's very clear, and those places tend to get stuff back to you quick. Those places often tend to be newer little magazines. Some of them are a little eccentric, but your likelihood of getting published in those is really good if you send out to 5 or 6 of them every issue that comes in. A lot of them are looking for new writers, new voices. They're sort of tired of the same old thing. And they're small enough in their publication, it isn't going to get you famous throughout the entire country, but it'll get you published. This is another one, and it's put out by the people who do Writer's Digest. It's called the Writer's Handbook, and it has chapters by different writers on different aspects of writing, tricks, mistakes they made that you don't want to make, and then in the back, a similar index. It's not as detailed as the Writer's Guide ones. There's a lot more how-to stuff in this one, but it does have a similar index in the back. So all of these things, if you get into them and use them and take the time to look for them, you can find descriptions that fit what you do. The thing is not to get discouraged. You'll get probably thousands more rejections in your life than you'll get acceptances, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad writer. What it means is that there's some individual back there, and it's only one person, even though it's a big magazine, who finally makes a decision, and they just might have read 42 poems about birds this month, and they don't need another one. Your poem may be 1.5 lines too long for the space they have. I mean, literally, those kinds of considerations come in. If you just keep doing it, you'll get a kind of a response. Some of the easy guides to help you make sure your manuscript doesn't have any dumb mistakes in it. This is the Idiot's Guide to Grammar, Strunk and White, Elements of Style. And it's very clear, it's written in plain English, it has good examples. This one, Less Than Words Can Say, the Underground Grammarian, is sort of fun. It gives you examples of the most horrible ways English has been misused and gotten published by famous people. Fowler's Modern English Usage. This is a style manual that if you have a question about if you really need a comma there or can you hook those sentences together and get away with it, this one will answer it. It's indexed like a dictionary. If you have a question about when you use if, it's in here. This one I brought for the benefit of the teachers. Getting Published, Educator's Resource Book. It's for teachers who write about either creatively or about their classrooms and classwork. And I say this to every teacher I meet, you should be publishing about the work you're doing with your students, especially the creative writing work, especially the arts work, more now than ever, because as you all know, arts funding is going down the toilet quick. And the kind of thing that you can point to as documentation that arts really does have an effect, writing really does have an effect in the schools, is by publishing articles in academic journals, which for some reason are more highly regarded than actual masterpieces of literature. But this is a really good guide, and this does come in paperback. And I don't know that they put it out annually, although this one is like an updated edition and it's several years old. And most of these use either the APA style book or the Chicago Manual of Style stuff. So that's for teachers. If you have any specific questions about, if you have a manuscript that you want to know is ready and you're not sure, Hellgate Writers is one of the places that you can call and people will look at it. A lot of the people who work in this town in bookstores, in music stores, in Freddie's Feed and Read, in places where you can find food, are writers. And generally, they're willing to hang around and talk with you. This is a very congenial town for writers. There's not a lot of, I'm not going to tell you how I got here because maybe you'll get here too. Writers are really willing to help you. And I hope that you really will start. There are some children's publications. Turtle is one of them. Child Highlights for Children. Remember that book from your childhood? One called Skipper that takes writing for young people by young writers, and they pay good. And that's another resource that you might explore. And it's only 8:30. Does anybody have questions? How many of you have sent stuff out to anywhere? Was it local? Did you do it like for? Yeah, it was local. Like what, newspaper? Okay, so like the independent writing contest. Have any of you submitted to like little literary magazines? Where did you send? There's several new magazines sort of getting born in Missoula even as we speak. One is called Teacup, and it's on the shelves. I know I saw it in Food for Thought. I've seen it in Freddie's, and I assume that it's other places. It's some MFA students from up at UM who graduated and decided that they'd like to do a little literary magazine, and they're looking for submissions, especially from new writers and especially from women. If you pick up any publication, you will find that unless it's specifically writing by women, anywhere from 2/3 to 3/4 of the submissions are by men. This should make you really angry if you're female, because no way are 3/4 of the best writers in this country men. I would guess it's probably about 50-50. The publishing industry is terribly skewed towards male writers. That's just the way it is. Use your initials. Don't use your name if you're female. My publications tripled when I stopped using my name and started using my initials. If you live in a really small place like Stevensville, get a Missoula post office box if you're serious. They'll look at your writing more seriously than if you come from, for instance, Arvada, Wyoming. my publications went way up when I just got a post office box in Sheridan, and they didn't go, oh, another weird housewife from somewhere. There's another one called Intermountain Woman that's coming out with the first issue, I think, real soon in May, that is looking for anything, book reviews, literary analysis, articles, essays, poetry, fiction by women. They are also looking for younger writers and new writers. So those are two opportunities in town which you might seriously pursue. And if anybody finds out about any other ones, we'd be really glad to hear about it at Hellgate, because we keep an index and a list.
Really appreciate your writing and the thoughts that you've had to share with us. And this is great. We'd like to take just a couple minutes to break for refreshments from Food for Thought and Second Thought, and then come back, and I'd like to introduce the new writers. So if we break for maybe, come back in about 3-4 minutes. All right, I'd like to welcome you back to our Young Adult Writer Series. And when you come to read, if you could please, because we're recording it for MCAT, talk into the mic. It's not for amplification, it's just so that we can hear you with the recording. And just place your papers here, and that will avoid any noise from paper pages. Okay, so our first reader is Patty Peel from Hellgate.
I wrote this piece as an assignment for one of my writing classes, and it's kind of a personal venting piece, and it's written like how I talk. So, I mean, it's not written like a story kind of. It wanted to be a poem at first, but I couldn't put it into a poem, so it's a story. And it's called Love in an Institution. I do like this boy a lot, even if it is a bad thing. I mean, he and I were meant to be one and the same. That it is written in the stars is a given. I see his face when I look up at night. In fact, I don't think I even needed to call that psychic hotline, because my own personal inner eye saw that our love would be forever. Oh, I crave him right now, him and I close, breath upon skin, lips upon each other. I can't talk to him much because he doesn't answer the phone anymore. I guess his mother doesn't let him. She always picks up and is quite rude to me. I know she doesn't like me very much, and maybe it's because of those letters I sent her, explaining in what manner she would die if she didn't let me see him. I don't know. Maybe it's because I call all the time. This phone they gave me to use is out of order anyway. I remember the one night when he caressed my cheek at the dance, and the night he pressed his lips to the corner of my mouth, softly. Or was that on some movie I saw? I don't remember. Things get fuzzy sometimes. I used to walk past his house all the time and stare into the front upstairs window. I knew that it was his window, and I wondered if he saw me and how pretty I looked. I always got dressed up when I went by, in case he saw me and wondered how I was. I didn't want him to forget me. My father and my therapist say that I am obsessive about this boy, and that I need to let go and realize that he doesn't care for me the way I care about him. A classic case of unrequited love that quack with a pipe and a fake PhD says to me. Whatever, I don't believe him. I know my boy cares about me. I don't understand why he doesn't say hello in school. Maybe his mother has gotten into his head and brainwashed him. I know she has spies everywhere. I know he avoids me, but I love him all the more because he wants to be good to his mother. Wait, do I go to school anymore? I can't really remember when we touched last, or did we touch at all? I'm getting blurry again. I tried before to tell someone my feelings, but that dumb lady who brings my medication won't talk to me. I guess it was because I punched her when she refused to bring me the phone so I could call him. I don't know. I need to color again. It's the only way I express myself. I have my whole cell decorated with pictures of him. At least, I think it's him. Anyway, I don't recall his exact features. After I cut him up with a knife that one night, he probably looks a lot different. He was in the papers and the TV news after that day. I don't care how he looks. Beauty is only skin deep, and he is still the same person on the inside. Maybe a little bit bitter and angrier than before. Oh my gosh, it's late and lights out is only a little while away. I really enjoyed telling you this, and I hope we'll talk again. I think you're one of my favorite toys. I have to go get strapped in, so I'll say goodnight.
Next, we have Chelsea Walmsley from Sentinel.
I have a couple that I'd like to read. The first one is when I found out that I had to move again, and it's basically an annual thing for me. But I was feeling pretty depressed about it, so I picked up my pen. My reality. I watched the hourglass as the sand slips down, my hands soaked with sweat, making it easy for my life to fall. No one around to hear my cry as my cry fades into the sky. My breath still as my heart stopped a while ago, so still. Tears running from the fear which caused them, they could be bled if in the dark. My thoughts slipping away since no one will listen to them. Beliefs are nothing anymore, I lost my faith, for no one believed in them. Love is still here, she tries and listens, but can't, for I do not even whisper to her. Fear stays with me, never going to leave. He knows he's a complete part of me. The next one was kind of an English assignment. I just kind of felt a little woman power in me that day, so. It's called Do You See? I am not what others want me to be. I wonder what the problem really is. I hear cries for help, including my own. I see people being crushed because they're not normal. What's your definition of normal? I want everyone to see we are all different, yet we are all the same race. I am what I am, and you're a part of me. I pretend it's not there, the hate. I feel insecure in this world. I touch who I can and try to make them see. I worry no one will ever see. I cry and scream for someone to listen. I am an individual. I understand everyone's ideas, but don't believe. I say what's on my mind. I dream someday everybody will see. I try to make that dream come true. I am a unique woman, and I am capable.
Rebecca Horst from Hillgate.
I forgot the story that I was going to read tonight, so I had to find stuff that I never read before. So Suicide calls my name. I listen with wetting ears, calling when I sit alone, listening to the music play through my heart. Suicide whispering in my head, talking to me sweetly. All I do is sit there, patiently, waiting, happily content, hearing the sad, crucial stifle and breaking through. Sound rhyming, raping the air, a small, innocent voice coming from a small desire inside. I sit on the floor of my basement palace with an empty bottle of vodka. I ain't drinking no more. Vodka just sits there, empty, as I sit there hearing songs speak. Words are floating into my eyes. Cats are spying past the sheets. Blankets of hidden shoes that have walked up and down along the flowing, thundering riverbed. Serving my feet, walking, no running, fast to jail, bars you spy behind, dreaming of fast motorcycles, dirty jeans, and holy black leather. Grease is falling very slowly from the corner of her eyes that belong to me. Eyes, the only thing that belong, not that precious baby soul I've given. My bridge being one long hill that may only go upward, never downfall, to the empty bottle sitting. I give my ears so he will hear the words that suicide speaks. Okay. And none of these have titles. I'm not very good with titles. Through the black pupil of my eye I watch the people covered in golden plastic, pretending the covering of our skin is obvious, color coding our naked bodies. Casual acceptance waved away, so we talk and decide, then change and disguise. And people could think this poem is lame, but what if the world turned around tomorrow and rode an elevator to the highest skylight, looked down upon the concrete cities with masked bodies, pretending that flesh and blood is none of the dream. See that person as a person, dressed in skin, open the door to the way to hearts win. God speaking to the red, white, and blue, freedom whipping in the wind. When Jesus drives, you're in a sink. There's gonna be a revolution where gunshot baby won't touch my skin. Angels will rise and mother will side. Side my feet that thorns have truced. See the movement inside, decides my fate. When gunpoint Blake, think I'm gonna shake. Through the black pupil of my eye, I don't see your blue jean baby face. Rose petals, smoking ass, brand name boot, hippie leg, screaming protest, pistol shooting open mouth. I listen to what made your heart beat in the first place.
Jennifer Bissett from Hillgate.
First of all, I'd like to excuse my attire. I just came from work. Okay. I have one untitled, and like Beck, I'm not very good with titles. A disease, like cancer, but twice as hard to battle, twice as hard to. Watching this anorexic, sad little girl walk by, slowly, deliberately. A deep blue corduroy skirt hanging low with a loose belt on its last sorry hole. 2 inches from pink, baby pink on a baby tee, raw against deep tan skin in the sunless winter. Wisps of cherry hair ruffle weakly, like her frame, looking like a castle of cards, swaying slightly 1/4 inch for every hollow breath exhaled hard, uneven from her bitter Maybelline lips, till you're certain she'll topple and your arm will go out to catch her against your chest, when suddenly she holds her breath, quietly, smiling, and stacks another card on top. And this one's called She's Got My Kind of Religion. She's on a quest, got herself a new journey. She's fresh, full, and soft, a strawberry. She's alive, she's running high, long, fast, and smooth. A white Russian last night, Boston cream stout today, flowing sultry cigarettes and anything else that suits her. She's got herself a new beat, and nothing but a dirt road between her and everywhere. Dust on a sticky dash keeps her going. She likes the way it looks. Likes the way her mama's purple scarf flies by the radio antenna, picking up static and truckers. Likes the way her mama's scarf flies as she flies down her way. And this last poem isn't one of mine, but I would like to read it. It's a friend of mine's. It's called Neon and Rain. You're nowhere, but it's somebody else's nowhere. Just a busy street to you, too busy to be friendly. The smells seem stronger because of the rain. You know, car exhaust and grease. Yeah, the restaurants smell greasier and the lights seem brighter and they're all over 'cause it's wet. Your collar won't keep out the rain, and you feel like you just stepped out of the 20s. Your cigarette sizzles and you cup it, you shiver and it's cold. And the loneliness that's been there all along increases with the rain. It holds you, like Mom used to, and you miss her. And the way she smelled. And you're too damn young and you miss her. And you're too damn young and you miss them all. And you wonder, is the whole world crying? Or is it just a neon in the rain?
Bill Norman from Loyola.
All right. My reading was a spontaneous event tonight, so you're at the mercy of what I could scrounge up out of the rucksack. Okay, first one's called The Dock of Evening. We stood at the dock of evening and waited for death's bounty to come sailing in across the oceanic expanse of a life. The crowd, mother of individuality, mocks its children. A sad hermit jumps off the end of the dock into the cove of life to meet the ship fast approaching. A madman drinks his wine and slugs his wife, then vanishes into thin air at the dock of evening. An old woman, rosary in hand, calls the ship to her side. Crucifixes adorn her treasure. I am the mirror man. Just see what's there at the dock of evening. Second one's a little more political. It's called Saw and Heard. I saw the mind move in the evening talk box. I saw the brains in the evening restroom. I saw the monkey lovers shot by happy Europeans. I saw the car wail past the funeral home. I saw the reflection in the window there. I heard the cry in the evening shadows. I heard the child's tears encased in concrete. I heard the news come out of Lincoln. I heard the bombs in California. I heard your name in the explosions.
Kendra Junkert from Big Sky.
I was just up late writing one night, and this is what I came up with. It's called Talking to Rocks. The hills behind the wall are faces, and secretly they smile at me, just because they know I like it. And the music that filters through tickles my eyelashes, dances across my tongue, leaving a lingering sweetness, like a forgotten dream. The song was swaying like tall grass, flowing from tree to tree, like watching Mallory skipping down Front Street in the rain. That's when I realized I had known the dream all along. The woman was looking outside, smiling for no particular reason, and a tired businessman glanced twice, thought he saw Sandra Bullock, but no, it was just the smile that made her eyes shine so beautifully. Then the man gazed up into the drizzling clouds and thought of Florida. But then, who goes to Florida in June? As Murray the cop ponders the idea of cheap tourists in plastic sandals living in a deserted, rundown motel, a ghost town of the off-season. And then again, if kids could love the rain, so could he. He saw himself crawling up to the wall. If only he could peek over, maybe even climb to the top, and watch the blue faces sing to him through their shining teeth. I might end up there tomorrow, because I have nothing else planned for this weekend, and besides, rocks need people to talk with, too.
Jennifer Halverson from Big Sky.
The poem that I wrote today, me and a couple of my friends went on a trip to Canada over spring break, and this is just a little bit about some of the things that happened to us there, and it's called After Canada. I want to spend my days sipping cafe au lait in a shop on a cobblestone street. He walked in and sat unnoticed in the midst of the crowd. I had heard of him. He wasn't what I expected. His name doesn't suit him. I want to spend my nights in discos devouring Molson's because it's damn good beer. I want to meet him in Iceland, but not for the same reason, because no one goes there. I want to tour Hungary, Romania, Norway, maybe Spain, Italy. I remember his sweater, but not his face. He asked me if I was patriotic, and I lied. As we talked, my thoughts were cliché. This will last forever, I told myself. Then the music stopped. Bouncers herded students in various stages of drunkenness into cabs, and we made our way outside, practically ignoring one another. We parted silently, not even talking with our eyes, and I looked from my comfortable seat in Allison's car. He was looking back, saying, what's gone and what's past help should be past grief. But we don't have to tell that part of the story.
Stacy Harris from Big Sky.
Okay, my poem is untitled, and it is basically about censorship and the way a person feels when they feel proud of themselves. Right. My pride simply resulted from the workings of a woman who has just freed herself from the chains, a woman who has blossomed and broken away from the treacherous gardens of ice. Pride is oppressed. Once again, this woman has been bound to chains and soiled to brick walls. The filth seeps into my pores and crawls into my blood, my prideful, holy blood, my blood of woman, carrying 1,000 people to thousands of destinations. And of those thousands of destinations, I search. But nowhere, not one single place, not one single person is named freedom. Not the Constitution, not a God, and maybe not myself. Thank you.
Dan Renfro from Big Sky.
I look at her. She looks at me. We both smile and look away. She looks at me. I look at her. We both smile and look away. That beautiful, captivating smile and that half laugh, it seems to say, come on, talk to me. I don't bite. Chicken shit that I am, I keep my personal sanctum sacred. We continue our little optical dance for several turns. The last time I turn away for what I think is forever. A month later, we meet again. After a few swigs of caffeine, I have my instant ego shield up. She seems to be like a person who doesn't act like the people I know. Kind-hearted, open-minded, good-natured, fuel for the fire of the soul. And yet she seems discolored, a beautiful blue glass bottle filled with crude oil, ready for the spark to melt down the bottle and show the inner thoughts. It seems alluring, the potential fire inside. We spend the weekend evenings together, but yet alone, each of us alone in our thoughts, together in our love for the dramatic arts, our camaraderie and kinship with each other and others we don't know and don't really care to. I build up to the question and then come back to reality. Bob tells me I shouldn't, but the color reaver tells me I should. I tell Bob to fuck himself and do it. Score one for the color reaver. It's only score. Bob's first loss. Thus it begins again, more for my sake than hers.
Thank you very much for sharing your writing. It's such a thrill and privilege to hear you and have you be part of our writer series. Next week we will have you as our guest. We will have our teachers as writers read as well as you. So I'd like to welcome you to the next Young Adult Writers Workshop or Young Adult Writers Series next week, where will be teachers and students reading. And I'd like to thank BJ for coming tonight. It was wonderful of you to share your writing and what you know of the publishing world and the writing world. So thanks, BJ. Okay, thank you, Karen.